Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Ryan, and Cliff and I thought we had about 5 minutes of material each, so we thought we can both fit in here. This morning we found out we have 20 minutes apiece for a 20-minute presentation, so I'm going to just hit a few high points. And thanks to the speakers before me, Cliff and Steve and the others, because it's a lot of my material. The first thing I want to say is I'm a water quality guy, but water quality is not about water quality. That's one of the big mistakes. What we really want, and what I think we really want, and my message is, in Florida, it's a highly productive place. We want to manage it for productivity. We want to bring back the productivity. To do that takes all the pieces that Steve talked about. Things have to be habitats and water and nutrients have to be in the right place at the right time. If I had to stop now, that would be my message. The other thing that I always want to say is people in Southwest Florida love it here. They love the water. They love nature. Just 2 weeks ago, people in Manatee County, 1,000 people came to a public meeting saying, we don't want to see our mangroves torn out and our seagrass dredged. Time and time again, people in our area support the work that you're doing. This is hand grenades and horseshoes. These are big generalizations. That's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to have to assume, just for time's sake, that you kind of know what TMDLs are. Total maximum daily load is a regulatory program saying you can't pollute too much. You got to cut back your pollution to this point where it doesn't impact the biology. Designated use, well-balanced population of fish. It's a biological endpoint. But chemists like me and engineers, we keep thinking it's about chemistry, but it's really not. The win for Florida and our community is to have that biologically productive system. So you guys can tell people like us, don't forget what we're really here all about. TMDLs are also, what I think, very expensive, although there have been some big numbers here. Manatee Basin BMAP here on the bottom line, $50 million. I think that's a lot. We built one stormwater pond for $20 million in town. I think that's a lot of money. You need to think about how you spend money in these settings. In Florida, these are the pollutants. You may think the pollution in Florida is, estrogen, toxins and metals and things, but when you look at the TMDLs, it's about nitrogen and phosphorus. That's 50%. Those nitrogen and phosphorus are food for productivity, but it has to be the right amount in the right place. So we don't want to have an algae bloom everywhere. We want to have the right thing. And bacteria, of course, everybody's for that. So and then other smaller things. BOD really ends up being nitrogen in our area anyway. To control pollutant loading, which is what TMDLs are, pollutant loading is two things. It's the total amount of pollution that gets into a water body. The TMDL says you have to take back that total, and you can control it two ways, by volume or concentration. Sarasota County is a place that's mostly suburban. We don't have feedlots and a lot of high-powered pollution sources, and that's true throughout much of this area. So we've looked at controlling concentration. For some reason, people think control concentration. That's the thing you need to do. But we've come to think differently. You've probably seen this kind of stuff. Stormwater is about first flush. Highly variable data. Really hard to make sense out of why land use concentrations are the way they are. So we've kind of gone away from that approach. Sometimes it really matters. It turns out we were doing a little study in a neighborhood, and let's see, I don't know if you can see that, I hope you can, and we were doing a storm event sampling right next to a beautiful rose garden in this neighborhood. And we thought this will be a nice representative sampling location. But as it turns out, the nitrate numbers right next to this nice rose garden were about 10 times higher than what we would normally find in a similar subdivision. Just sort of an aside, but kind of interesting. Sometimes we argue about fertilizer, and this helped us close the deal on knowing that it's a small impact here, but it matters. It's one of those high concentration places. Part of what you guys do in restoring wetlands and things like that, people often think, if I put in this wetland treatment system, it'll polish up this water and make the concentrations much lower. But what's been seen in many places is you end up with about 1 milligram per liter of nitrogen coming out of a wetland over time. In our creeks, we have about 1 milligram per liter of nitrogen. So if you run one through and one comes out, nothing happens in terms of concentration. So you have to, if you want to do that kind of thing, you have to find a place that has a high concentration that will be purified by that process. One of the big level things that we think about is if you have a series of stormwater treatment devices, the first one does all the work. The second one is a declining efficiency, and the third one is declining efficiency. So like in this kind of pathetic here schematic, the first stormwater pond might take 40% of the nitrogen out. If it flows to the next pond, it might take 5 or 10% out. The third pond might take 2% out. So the first one is the cheapest, most effective thing when you're looking at the landscape scale. I have an example here from Bug Slough Preserve that my compatriots here from Sarasota County probably put this whole thing together. But in this particular case, there's actually a whole bunch of little specks in that dark picture up in the top. About 1,500 birds nest on an island in an urban setting with 2 big roads next to it. At night, they're there pooping in the water, and the concentration of water in that lake is about 5 milligrams per liter. It's really unusual in Sarasota County. So there's a project now downstream in that yellow area. The lake would be at the bottom right corner. That high concentration water is now going to go through a restored wetland in the Bug Slough Preserve right in town. In fact, I live walking distance from this place. Beautiful spot. It's great having a nature preserve right in town. And this wetland will work. It will purify water because we're starting with a really high number. So that kind of thing works for us in this setting. To try to figure out how to spend money properly on projects, we have these TMDLs looming for us. We look to the Myakka River watershed. We've already talked about it being the island of green. And so we want to study it and say, what are we trying to achieve? The Myakka is the example of how other watersheds should function. And I took this image from the minimum flows level from Southwest Florida Water Management District. And this helps us, time's up. I'll show you real quickly, I'll wind it up. The red bars are rainfall. And what you see is we have 7 or 8 months of dry weather, when really there's almost no flow in the Myakka River watershed. So the rest of the watershed should be like that, not much runoff in dry weather. Then in the summer, it starts raining, and it takes a while as the land soaks up the water. Eventually, all the puddles are filled and water starts to flow. Then it lags past the rain. I guess I'll just keep moving. That's one of the models. There was a restoration done in Deer Prairie Slough. In fact, these guys may have been part of it again. And in this case, it's a tributary to the Myakka. It was a channelized slough that the channel was filled back in. There's no pollution there. There's no high concentrations. But you hold back that volume. You start aiming towards that goal of the right kind of water in the right place at the right time, like the Myakka. So this kind of slough restoration, great volume control, and it helps towards productivity. It helps towards conservation lands, which is what you guys know all about. We did a swale study. I'll cover this very quickly. 93% less nitrogen pollution. That's our big thing in Sarasota. In a swale-drained neighborhood as compared to a neighborhood with curb and gutter, where every little storm generates runoff. So all those dry season storms defy that hydrograph from the Myakka. This is how we want to go forward. We want to have infiltration in the urban watersheds so that we're starting to mimic what happens in the Myakka. A lot of it's just holding water back, but the grass, believe it or not, actually does take some pollutants out. So we said, well, how many swales are there? And in the bottom left, that's developed land is in red. That's the places where we might want to do work. We put all the stormwater BMPs, like the wet ponds that are in subdivisions, in the middle. Turns out we mapped out 65,000 acres that are served by swales. Old Florida, nasty swales. Old neighborhood, not beautiful bioswales, plain old grassy swales that you mow. That took 65,000 acres off of our priority list. Then we mapped all the impervious surfaces in Sarasota County. With the GIS tools now, it's amazing. So all the buildings, roads, sidewalks, parking lots, and we look from this angle at downtown Sarasota. In GIS, all the impervious blends together, and you get these bright red things. Yellow has stormwater treatment, so this tells us again, it reaffirms, Go to these urban cores. This is where your runoff volumes are most whacked out. They're also very close to important water bodies. So horseshoes and hand grenades, we're kind of narrowing down where do we need to do projects. So how does that work for you guys? Well, I'm not sure because I don't do what you do, but I think if you look at that there's TMDLs, they're mandatory. Get connected with people who are trying to do TMDLs, talk to them about your preservation lands, and say, how can we work together? How do we make this? TMDLs are expensive. We got to do the cheapest, best way possible, and it should be for productivity. We got to remind everybody about that. So we have lots of preserved lands. We have lots of impaired water bodies, kind of a weird turnout of events, and quite a few TMDLs. We can probably put these things together and get some great projects like Steve and others here have talked about. That's water quality from me. Any questions? No questions. I'll be in back if you want to talk. Sorry, Lisa.